The first flash came without warning, a white wall that erased the aisle and the heads of the people in front of her. The second tore straight through the cabin. The Christmas garlands taped along the overhead bins fluttered once and vanished into a scream of air. Seats wrenched from the floor. Luggage rose like birds and were ripped away. A roar bigger than engines filled everything. And then the world dropped. She was still buckled in when the row she shared with two strangers snapped free and spun. Above her was sky. Below her was a green that moved like water. She felt the strap bite her stomach, the wind press her face back, and a strange, impossible calm took over, the sort that comes when there is nothing to grab and no more choices left. The jungle rose to meet her in a rush of leaves and shadow. Hours earlier, on the morning of December 24th, 1971, 17-year-old Juliane Koepcke boarded Lanza Flight 508 with her mother in Lima. The plan was simple: a short hop east to Pucallpa, then on to the research station where her parents worked. The airline had a reputation that made her father wary, but it was Christmas, flights were packed, and the two of them had finally found seats together near the back. Outside, thunderstorms piled over the Andes. Inside, people shifted gifts under their seats and joked about making it in time for dinner. The turbulence began as the plane crossed the mountains and held it all the way toward the rainforest. Bags quivered in the racks. Lightning strobed in the cabin windows. A voice over the speaker promised a safe arrival. Then the static cut off mid-sentence. The lightning strike hit the wing, and in an instant the aircraft broke apart. Juliane never felt the fuselage go. One heartbeat she was staring at a tray latch and hearing her mother's voice. The next, she was in open air, still strapped to the triple seat, the wind tearing at her dress, the jungle turning under her like a slow green sea. She has no memory of the last seconds. The canopy closed over her, branches slashed across her limbs, and then impact. When she opened her eyes, it was night, and she was alone on the forest floor. The air smelled of earth and rot and something sweet. Rain dripped from leaves onto her face. She tasted blood. Her right eye had swollen shut, her collarbone throbbed, and deep gashes striped her legs. Her glasses were gone. So was one shoe. The other lay crooked a few feet away with the broken strap curling like a dead leaf. She spoke once, testing the world. "Mama." The trees answered with insects and distant water. At first light, she took stock. The three-seat frame that had carried her down had wedged into a thicket, its metal buckles twisted. Bits of insulation clung to the shrubs. Above, she could hear the buzz of planes searching, but the canopy swallowed everything. She remembered her father's instructions from the years in the Amazon. If you are lost, find water. Streams lead to rivers. Rivers lead to people. She slipped the remaining sandal on and kept it for probing the water ahead of each step, tapping for stingrays or hidden sticks. Every movement cost pain. Ants found her wounds. Mosquitoes found everything else. She began with hope that the searchers would come that day and kept moving when they didn't. She followed a trickle until it became a creek, then a stream. The current offered direction when the trees tried to turn her around. The sun disappeared under the leaves by late afternoon and came late the next day, so she used the water to tell time, cool, steady, always downhill. At night she lay on sandbars and fought sleep because she feared never waking. The rain came in sheets. Her dress stayed wet. She tried not to think about the people who had been next to her, the row of seats ahead of her, the voice of her mother. When vultures circled low, she did not look up. On the third day, she found wreckage, a section of fuselage that had carved a channel through saplings, leaving a litter of torn metal and scattered luggage. The smell arrived before the sight of any bodies. She forced herself to search. From an open suitcase, she took a bag of candy and rationed it. She saw no first aid kit, no water bottle, nothing that would help except a small book and a piece of plastic she could use as a cover. She called out until her throat was raw. The only reply was the river. She waited, because the banks were a web of thorns and hidden holes. The water was brown but cool. Her skin blistered and then hardened with muck. The insects settled into a constant cloud. She learned to ignore them, the way you ignore your own breath. On the 5th day, she heard an engine, shouted until she sobbed, and watched the sound pass overhead and fade. The canopy held its secrets. She kept to the stream. Her wounds turned, the gash on her right arm, a deep groove from the fall, swarmed with tiny white threads that moved. She understood enough biology to know what they were and that they would not stop by themselves. She grabbed at them and pulled until her hands shook. They returned. She felt feverish and lightheaded. She drank from the river as her father taught her. Fast, clear water was safer, and kept moving. On the 8th day, she saw footprints. Not animals. Human. The relief almost dropped her to her knees. She followed them along the bank until they disappeared in a stretch of gravel, then found them again where they rejoined the water. Near dusk, she rounded a bend and saw a shelter. A simple hut on stilts, its thatch dark with rain, a canoe pulled up beside it like a sleeping animal. She climbed the ladder, called out, and found no one. Inside, there was a small outboard motor, a coil of fishing line, and a can of gasoline. She hesitated, then did what she had to do. She poured a little fuel into the wound and watched the larvae writhe and fall away. The pain was bright enough to make the hut tilt. When it passed, she was shaking, but steadier. She slept there, the first time under a roof since the fall. The next morning she heard voices. 3 men appeared from the river, Peruvian woodcutters with wary eyes that softened when they saw her. She tried to speak and found only a whisper. They gave her food and water, then lifted her carefully into the canoe and took her downstream for hours, the river widening as the jungle leaned back. At a village with a small clinic, a nurse cleaned her wounds and wrapped her arm. A plane carried her to Pucallpa, where doctors treated the infections, confirmed her collarbone was broken, and counted the days she had survived. 11. Only later came the pieces that make sense of how anyone could fall from the sky and live. The seat section likely acted as a crude parachute, its spin and the cushion of branches slowing the descent just enough. The canopy, dense and wet, flexed under her and bled off the last of the speed. Her age and weight helped, the knowledge her parents had given her, the water, the way to read a river, what to fear and what to ignore, did the rest. Fate is a word people use in quiet rooms. In a rainforest, it looks like a teenager with one shoe, moving because stopping is another kind of death. The investigation confirmed what lightning had done and what neglect made worse. The airline's safety record was poor. Warnings about the storm went unheeded. There were no survivors found at the crash site itself, only a miracle who walked out of the jungle days later. Juliane learned the hardest news in the hospital. Her mother had died in the crash. Grief arrived in waves that no medication could touch. Outside her window, the river went on. She returned to the forest years later as a scientist, studying the life that had both hurt and saved her. Reporters always asked about the fall. She told them what she could: the flash, the wind, the silence afterward, the taste of river water, the sound of her own breath when she realized she was alive. She did not call it luck. She called it survival, and she remembered the people who did not get the chance. On paper, the story begins with a boarding pass and ends with a hospital bracelet. In truth, it begins the moment a girl decides the only direction left is forward and keeps to it, measuring time by the push of a current and the sound of her own steps in the water. In the green vastness that swallowed a plane, one person chose not to disappear. Thank you for listening to The Lantern's Tale. Subscribe for more true stories if you dare.